So beginning this afternoon, we have two incredible guests to speak to you today. Two of the most powerful reasons for never forgetting what happened on January 6th are sitting before you today. Dr. Serena Liebengood is the widow of Capitol Police Officer Howard Liebengood, who took his own life just days after defending the Capitol. Dr. Liebengood has since been at the forefront of a national campaign to acknowledge officer suicides as line of duty deaths and for the inclusion of those officers on the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, a long overdue recognition. Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn has been a passionate and eloquent witness to that day as he and fellow officers, including Officer Liebengood, fought to repel the rioters. In his book, Standing My Ground, Officer Dunn provides a stirring account and a call to action. I'll just read a bit of it, a passage. We could have run away. We could have said, we didn't sign up for this, but we did sign up for it. We just never imagined it like that. All of us have changed. Some of us physically can no longer do the job. Others are haunted daily by what happened, including me. While I am one of the officers whose job it was to protect the Capitol, like you, I'm first an American citizen who cares about this country and wants to see it do right. I'm a voter, I'm a tax-paying citizen. This is my country, and I deserve to know the truth to make sure this doesn't happen again. Please welcome Dr. Liebengood and Capitol Police Officer Harry Dunn. And we've agreed on who's going to jump first, and it'll be Dr. Liebengood. And we'll follow with your questions, as always.
Thanks for having me here today. I am Serena Liebengood, a suicide survivor. My husband, Howie, he was 51 years old, a 15-year veteran of U.S. Capitol Police, and he served on January 6th. That morning, I walked him to his car, and I saw him off to work, and I joked with him. I told him not to run towards danger. I want you to come back home to your wife. And we both laughed because my husband, he was dedicated to his job. He would always put service before himself. He went off to work, and when I saw the events that unfolded that day, my heart sunk. But when he returned home in the wee hours of the morning, I felt an incredible sense of relief. I thought that he was okay, and he was not okay. He worked nearly around the clock over the next few days with minimal sleep in between his shifts. And following his shift that Saturday, he died by suicide using his service weapon. You know, I thought that my situation was unique, but over the past couple of years, I realized that unfortunately it wasn't unique, that police officers are 54% more likely than American workers in general to die by suicide. They are at increased risk of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety-related disorders. And recognition of the psychological toll within policing, has increased over the past few years. There have been increased funding, programs, resources made available, but yet this discrepancy still exists. It is estimated that approximately 62% of police agencies have wellness programs and less than 5% of police agencies have suicide prevention programs. To me, that's unacceptable. More needs to be done. And this has inspired me to create a foundation in honor of my husband, the Howard Liebengood Foundation. And the goal of the foundation is to improve the health and wellness of law enforcement officers through interdisciplinary collaboration, education, and research. The foundation is committed to identifying opportunities for improvement in workplace health, access to health care services, as well as ultimately improving the health outcomes of law enforcement officers. Currently, the foundation, we are exploring ways to identify the gaps in healthcare. For example, we need more culturally competent healthcare providers, not just psychological healthcare providers, but also medical healthcare providers that understand the risk that occurs in policing. Not many healthcare providers are aware that police officers are at an increased risk. They do not understand the increased stressors that police officers are under. Another program that my organization is developing will focus on assisting agencies in navigating a generational shift. We're seeing a lot of agencies shift their focus on to police health, wellness, and safety. However, that is complex and that requires a lot of complex solutions. So I've tapped into my background. I'm a physician. I've tapped into my resources at Johns Hopkins. I've reached out to the law enforcement community, and I am hoping to engage law enforcement representation at every level. My goal is to create a comprehensive program to help these agencies create a fertile building block in which they can help improve access to care and reduce barriers to help-seeking behavior, as well as mitigate a lot of the organizational stress that police officers are experiencing. And as a physician, I think it's important that these programs are validated, that these programs are effective. I've been incredibly fortunate to have the Fraternal Order of Police serve as a fiscal sponsor. And this will allow donors to make tax-deductible contributions while my IRS application is being considered. And one other thing I wanted to add, that we have made progress over the past couple of years through the passage of the Public Safety Officer Support Act. And this act expands death and disability benefits to law enforcement officers that sustain acute traumatic stress disorder and PTSD as a result of mass casualty events. And I can't express the significance of that legislation. That sends a symbolic message to all survivors left behind. But also, more importantly, it tells officers who show up to work every day that their service and sacrifice matters. And although that accomplishment, the passage of that act, is so huge, I think it's important to keep moving this agenda forward. More needs to be done. And my foundation, I don't have all of the answers right now, but my goal is to have a foundation to help create and identify solutions so that no one, no officer, no widow, no one has to experience what I've experienced.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I don't know which direction to take appreciate this talk. And I will start with I can appreciate the need for the more easier accessibility to getting resources for mental health and to provide officers the opportunities and the resources they need to prevent something as tragic as what Serena experienced. Throwing money at it, that helps accessibility, right? Creating programs for these things to exist. As she said, the shift, the culture has changed into everybody's talking about mental health now. There's a lot more programs, but the elephant in the room, that is, it's still taboo to talk about how unwell you are, especially as a police officer. At the Capitol Police, we have the Howard Liebengood Center for Wellness. I'm a regular over there. It's fantastic. You can do anything from sit in a big old room with the sunrise and watch the sunrise at the Capitol while doing yoga or breathing exercise, and it's fantastic. The problem is not many people utilize it. I don't think it's not due to lack of knowledge. We promote the hell out of that thing. We want everybody to go there. But the stigma is still there. And people suck. People aren't nice. People are not kind to each other. And I think that's what it is. Like I've been vocal as hell about my feelings, my emotions, everything, the traumatic effect that I've had since January 6th. I get called all kinds of names. You're so soft. You're the P word. You wouldn't last a day up on the streets and on the NYPD. And these are coming from cops. These messages are coming from cops. So the culture, why would somebody want to submit themselves to that? I just found out that a police officer who had been tweeting about January 6th, consistently, no longer has their Twitter page. What happened? And their spouse saw some of the messages that they were getting from insurrection supporters. And they said, I'm no longer speaking up about this anymore. Deactivated their whole Twitter account. And we just live in a cruel world. So yes, I can appreciate all the money and the resources, but we just suck as human beings, just to be blunt. And we're not nice to each other. We're not kind to each other. And I think this has helped me transition to why we should never forget about this stuff. And a lot of stuff in the media, it's not you all, we're so in the moment, what's happening right now, that the next hot story or we move on without even solving the problem of what happened before. And January 6th is still ongoing. It's still ongoing. My book that I wrote, it comes out October 24th. Officer Fanone, his book was done a year and some change before mine. I struggled. I didn't know how to end the book because everything's still ongoing. Trump's got trials coming up, and you got members of Congress, and people are still getting sentenced. I'm going to court every time I have an opportunity to sit in that courtroom and stare at these people and let them know I didn't forget. I sat right behind Enrique Tarrio when he was sentenced. And he turned around and looked at me. I guess he was surprised. He turned around and he immediately turned back around. But I was the only one in the courtroom from that day. Only Capitol Police officer. It was another MPD guy. But so many people just move on. And it's so easy to forget about stuff because so much other stuff is happening. It's like we can't give all our attention there. And that's where the impasse is. How do we devote as much attention that's necessary to the mental health aspect, to the suicide awareness, to accountability, to justice, it was so much stuff that because of January 6th that exposed so much that, and that's where we are. How do we dedicate the necessary time towards that and cover what's going on in the rest of the world, So.
Hi, thank you so much for coming here and speaking with us. I'm Jackie. I'm with CQ Roll Call. But before I moved to DC, I was a local government reporter and had to cover police a lot, police department. And there ongoing struggle with making sure that their officers were, had the right mental health resources, what have you. But one of the other things that came up a lot was the idea that police officers are given too much. And this is like at a local level, in a different city than DC, so not US Capitol. But I'm wondering, over there, they had the idea of bringing in mental health specialists, what have you, other people who could come and triage a situation to kind of help lift that burden from police officers who weren't trained to handle literally everything in the world. I was wondering if there is a similar effort for maybe Capitol Police, where you guys are given a lot of different challenges, and it would be helpful to bring in someone who isn't necessarily just a police officer, but who could help supplement response to a situation. Maybe not January 6th, maybe another January 6th.
We've gotten specific training. One training that I got is called CISM, Crisis Interventions, something. I forgot. I'll get there in that. But it's specialized to traumatic events and how to debrief, and that's just amongst officers. But as far as resources, the Liebengood Center, the therapists that they brought in are some of the best trauma therapists and that I've seen. We have one of the young ladies spent time with soldiers in the battlefield over Afghanistan, maybe. But no, they are specialized and not just your therapist down the street. But it all goes back. We have some of the best resources that I think that are there, but people taking advantage of the resources still remains the problem. So, and maybe that could be accessibility, having virtual sessions, having call sessions. And that's something that you're working on, just getting it more accessible to officers. While like I said, we've made tremendous strides at it, I think there's still so much more that we can do going forward.
And I cannot speak to USCP specifically in terms of how or whether they have mental health specialists to assist in response. But I just want to highlight the importance of having culturally competent, healthcare providers. And that's one thing that we have focused on at USCP, making sure that the mental health care providers are aware of the unique stressors that law enforcement officers experience. And also just want to highlight or bring your attention to the accessibility piece as well. I think it's very easy to say at times, we don't know why the officers aren't, using our services. And I think that speaks to police culture, and not police culture and first responder culture in general, that it's challenging, it's unique, it's complex. And I think the most effective thing that we can do is figure out what barriers exist and figure out how to bring these services to the officers, rather than having the officers needing to figure out how to access the services. And I think that is an important opportunity that, we can undertake to try to move this ball forward.
Critical incident stress management, CISM training, and that was provided by other law enforcement who come around, and we get trained in it, so when an incident happens, we can respond out to officers and provide a level of support relative to the incident that they just experienced. With the counselor specifically at Capitol Hill, one of my therapists is a former police officer themselves, so they can relate, not maybe every experience, but to the culture and to what the things that we experience as first responders. So,
hi, I'm Minnie Raker with Time Magazine. You talked about people sucking and the stigma around mental health and the way the media moves on really quickly. And these seem to me like really ingrained systemic problems. And I'm curious if you think they're solvable and what your ideas are for solving them.
It's so interesting about just how do you solve something that's existed since the beginning of my life. I'm sure the next generation. I don't know. I just, I try to treat golden rule, treat everybody like the way you want to be treated. It just sounds simple, right? Some of the best experiences I had with people in the media were people that treated me as a person and not a story. Specifically, Gail King was one of the first people that reached out to me. And she said, Harry, I don't want an interview. I just want to be your friend. I still haven't done an interview before. We talk and text once a week, and she just cares. And showing that level of caring, I think is what all people should strive for. Just, as reporters, it's easy to just get focused on just the story. Dianne Feinstein just passed. Me working on the Hill, I know a lot of that inside. Don't call me for scoops, all right? But my phone's blowing up, because everyone want to be first. But instead of actually caring about how people are taking it, and it's just the culture, that we live in, and it's hard to see people as people and not just a juicy story, because that's what this is. Like, especially when there are few people that are speaking up about it, it's easy to just, that's the one, you're the guy. I'm a person who has a story. She's a person who has a story. And there's stories behind all these juicy headlines. There's people's lives that are affected by it and will never be the same. And I think, not intentionally, we lose sight of that. And I think that's not reporter coverage. It's just human nature. Because we all have stuff going on. And it's hard to just focus. I don't think we deserve everybody's attention, but be genuine when we have you in that moment. I could go on and on and on, but how many times do we ask somebody how they're doing, and we're already walking down the hall before they answer? Hey, how you doing? You okay? Keep on. Wait, I'm not okay. You really want to know? It's just the culture we live in, I guess.
Yeah, and I must say I'm a tad bit more optimistic, and I do think this issue is very complex, but I do believe that there are solutions. I do not think that we will come up with an adequate solution overnight. It's not going to be easy, and maybe this is the physician in me, but I'm all about trying to address some of the root causes of many of these issues. And I think, unfortunately, that requires a lot more work and a lot more insight. For example, addressing some of the issues in police culture, addressing how can we make sure that police officers had access to culturally competent, providers. I mean, I know that there's a shortage of mental health care providers for everyone, let alone police officers. How can we figure that out? And so I think if we can attack these individual pieces, I think we can make change. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think this also involves a partnership, not with just the media, not just with police agencies, also, the healthcare systems and educational systems. But I do think that there are solutions out there, and I'm in it for the long haul.
I hope so.
Yeah, but I think we can make some changes.
I think the only reason I look at it like that because I try to temper my expectations about things. Hell, every president has been able to say, I can bring peace to the Middle East, but they've been fighting since the Bible times in the Middle East. Like, can you really? Like, maybe that's just the way the world, and it may be, it's not optimistic, but I just think that's how it brings me kind of, I always say low expectations, high standards. So I want the best. I want that, but my expectations for it to happen aren't really high. So I think that's kind of why I frame it that way. So.
More of the relationship with media, of keeping that relationship with the person you're interviewing. It's like not only the story, it's also caring about the person. I also wanted to know, sometimes we're, as you mentioned, we're so into the story that I wanted to ask you, what are some better practices that we could have because we, as journalists, we do make mistakes when approaching these stories. And what are some of the things that, as journalists, we can do better when telling these stories? Because
I'm glad you asked.
Because I know that sometimes we do make mistakes on approaching these type of stories, and we do need help. Because these are stories that are important to tell, and are, you just mentioned, there are taboos, and we need to break those taboos. But how do we approach them in a respectful way that are the people that we are interviewing feel that it's making sense and it's being respectful for them and for the person that we're telling the story about?
I think y'all know a lot more about the First Amendment than I do, right? Freedom of the press and good stuff. However, my first interview that I did after January was the first interview I ever did with Pierre Thomas. And me and Pierre sat down and talked close to 4 hours. And it didn't even seem like an interview because he cared. And it was just a conversation. And which I get it. In the press, sometimes it's just, we're not having a conversation. You just talk. Yeah. And then you frame it, blah, blah, this is where he said this. But I think some of the most heartfelt, genuine, authentic interviews come with real human interaction. And I felt so good. It was so therapeutic. While they had their team working on, like, let's get the facts out and just that. Then I did an interview with David Muir. I was in there talking, asking great questions, and I would just leave him with like, boom. And I was like, yeah, he about to give me. And he was like, okay. So tell me. And I was like, wait, hold on. I just gave you gold, dude. You're not going to dig into that even more? Like, what are you doing? I mean, it was just so stone-faced. There was no emotion there. And I get it. Sometimes in reporting, it's not emotion. It's just, but we're all people. We're all people. And y'all watch the news. Here you are, the news. Some of the best interviews are the ones that they come from emotion. That it's just pouring through and you can feel it's palpable. And I think I get it. That's probably like a hard divide being a journalist or a reporter and inserting human emotion into it, because a lot of this world isn't just black and white. The world is entirely gray,
Yeah. I think for me, I would say just learning the topic. It's, for example, in my case, it would have been a very quick and easy report or article to say, hey, U.S. Capitol Police died by suicide, but just digging deeper, being able to explore and discuss and learn the underlying complexities. And so not only are you educating yourself, you're helping me communicate some of the important issues, but you're also teaching the audience out there about these important issues that no one thinks about. For example, but the attention on J6, we attended the trials, people focus on us, but no one thinks about all of these officers who suffer in silence. They're not on TV, they're not doing interviews, and they show up to work day after day. And so they may not have a voice, but you all do. And you all have an opportunity to continue to amplify their stories.
So it's more about, one of the things that you're mentioning, it's kind of like, well, yes, not only hyper-focusing on the Jan 6 situation, but also, this happened. They're suffering from PTSD. They're suffering from the repercussions of the situation that happened.
Exactly. And I think, look, for example, I didn't realize as a physician the increased risk for suicide, among law enforcement officers until my husband died by suicide. And I think being exposed to this, you all can, use this information to inform others. And I think and this is just only one piece about law enforcement, health and wellness. There's so much more out there in terms of legislation, access to resources, so much that you all can explore and learn about and educate others.
Yeah. One of the things that I actually found out, and this goes digging deeper part, Erin Smith, her husband died via suicide also. But me and her become close, we talk, and I found out that it wasn't, he felt bad or something. It was a physical injury that led him to that. It was because of physical trauma that he suffered from that day, which caused a brain injury. And I just thought, I didn't know the actual reason why, but she said that was one of the leading causes that contributed to his brain wasn't the way that it was, not because of a mental or emotional injury or scarring. I don't know how to phrase that. But I didn't know that. And when I'd seen her, we talked all the time. But I just talking, and I'm a friend, so it's hard. Learning more about it, digging deeper, finding out the actual root causes and stuff. And that's one of the things I'm glad you said. There's so many officers who don't talk. Everybody sees me, and I'm not the voice for anybody. I'm just telling my story. I don't speak for anybody except for myself. And there's so many officers that continue to show up day and that don't talk, that suffer in silence. And that's why every time I'm on the interview, I always do my best to try to acknowledge the men and women. It's not about me. It's not, but it's about everybody who gave so much effort that day. It'll be a challenge.
Hi, my name's Savannah, and I'm the Senate correspondent at National Journal. Nice to see you. I have a question for each of you, if that's okay. First for you, Doctor. You mentioned how some of these issues could be solved by further initiatives and legislation, and I wanted to know if you or your foundation are working with lawmakers on police reform, because that's something that's been stalled through Congress, I think the initiative really started in 2019, 2020, and if that's something that you and your foundation are working with Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott on. And then for you, Harry, obviously as we go into 2024, things still suck. It's still incredibly polarized. Is the United States Capitol Police prepared for the next election and the high motions that may come with whatever the result might be?
Thank you for that question. So we are not working on police reform. Part of being a nonprofit organization that limits what we can do. But what we are doing, we are engaging leaders throughout the law enforcement community so that we can help figure out solutions to best, address the needs of police agencies. And that is always, on the back, in the background in terms of, legislation out there, how does that impact access to services? But I think that the best manner for the organization to do that is indirectly. Like if, for example, one of the programs in the organization is to address unmet needs, to figure out what gaps in terms of research exists. How can we improve access to healthcare, to resources? And once we put that information out there, we get all of our researchers together, then that will be information that folks who lobby, folks who educate the legislators can use to inform, legislative actions.
I actually have been working with Tim Scott working with, right, whatever. I've met with each of them, and I just hate, and this goes back to forgetting about the story, because they we're at an impasse and we can't find it, we can't come to an agreement, it's dead. So we forgot about the story until the next shooting of an unarmed black man happens, and they're rioting in the streets, and they're marching, and they're burning down buildings. Yes, we need to change this police reform. And we're at an impasse again, and we forget about it. The story doesn't die just because legislators can't come to an agreement. Something still needs to be done. And that's what I kind of bluntly remind them when I go talk to them about it. The issue's not dead, guys. Y'all may have deaded your relationship, but it still needs to be done. But as far as to answer your question about the political, I can't speak for Capitol Police. I can't. I'm not ready. To be blunt, I'm not ready. I don't know how the hell I'll be able to do my job if Trump is elected president. And I don't know. I don't know how. And honestly, I don't think that I could. I can't speak. Like I said, I only speak for myself. I don't speak for my organization, any other officer. But I'm not ready. Just to be blunt, I don't got any cute little anecdotes after that. But no, I'm not ready.
I'm just curious how you both take care of yourselves while, continuing to relive this moment, time after time, even in talking to us. Of course, we don't want to forget the story. You talk about people moving on too fast. But how do you take care of yourself while doing that?
I love therapy. Therapy has been one of my best friends over the past couple of years. I talk about PTSD in terms of the law enforcement officers. Through my experience losing my husband, I also suffered trauma. And it's important for me to work through those issues, but also working through this and being able to speak to you all and being able to invest my energy, in, creating an organization to address these topics that has provided me, fulfillment that is allowing me to move forward, knowing that I can prevent this from happening to someone else. That is the most incredible thing. And I've been very engaged with U.S. Capitol Police officers and just having them reach out to me to thank me for, what I'm doing or showing up. That helps to get me through each day.
That's awesome. I appreciate Serena so much. She does a lot, and I just like I said, just text her out the blue. You doing all right? Just checking on you. Her strength is very encouraging, refreshing to me. But for me, as far as I don't really have a good answer because I struggle with everything that's happening, that has happened a lot, even to this day. I did my book unboxing yesterday. I got my books. It was really good. And then I was browsing through and I read a chapter, and even you reading that little footnote just brings me back to, damn, we're still here. And one of the things I talked about in therapy recently with my therapist is that I don't know if I really want to heal from January 6th. And that may sound crazy, right? Like, why wouldn't you want to heal? Because the emotion that's fueling me to do whatever the hell I'm doing is caused by the anger that day caused. And I feel like I'm making some kind of a difference by talking to people. I was in Manhattan last week and talking at the Red Cross about resiliency. And I've reached a lot of people, but I couldn't have given that impassioned speech talk if I didn't feel the way that I feel now. And I'm worried, selfishly, that if and when I heal completely from this day, I won't have this fire that I have now to help people. So it's kind of like it's like suffering, but it's like self-inflicted suffering. But I try to control it. Like, I mean, I'm not in a bad place, I'm all right, but I always qualify that with all things considered. Like, my health is good, I'm alive, I have food in my refrigerator. Yeah, all things considered, I'm all right. But I don't know, and I feel like me speaking, and if I can help one person, it's worth it. And give somebody a voice, give somebody hope. And that's what I've realized that I've done to some people. I've helped them out. I recently joined the Speakers Bureau. And it's funny, when we had the talk to, when I decided to sign with them, and I just, like, I'm not this refined speaker. I just go out there and I just talk from my heart. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I say I don't know. I don't BS. I answer your question. I just talk. And this is, I guess, how I take care of myself. See, we just figured it out together. That's how I take care of myself. I do this, and I talk about it, and I try to help people. So
I appreciate it. That's very real.
We just figured it out.
Thank you both for coming. This is similar to kind of what most people have probably already thought of or said, but in talking about the both of your stories, have journalists done enough to help the two of you so far? And your families and your stories?
I've had the great fortune of working with journalists who have highlighted this issue. And, is there ever enough? I can always accept more. But what is most meaningful to me, and it's helpful when my husband's name is acknowledged, but what really helps me is focusing on this issue. Because although my heart is broken over the loss of my husband, just highlighting the issue of mental health, policing, the struggle that law enforcement officers experience, that in my mind is what needs to happen. And that's where I have appreciated the greatest impact. Just focusing on that issue and not letting it go when, our short attention span moves on to something else, knowing that there are reporters who say, hey, this is important, and I'm going to talk about this again over and over until we can impact change.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, you can always accept more. But like we said from the beginning, there's so much stuff going on. How can you dedicate? I can appreciate the reporters, the news anchors, that if anytime you want to talk, like, I'll have you on TV. And you hear that, but it actually has been the experience for me. And we need, get me on, let's talk. It actually works. Like, holy shit. Guys, really? You meant that? But no, just I think you have, because it's still the news. It's still the news. Everything that's happening. I mean, we live in D.C. When will this never? I do. When will this ever not be a story or front and center? And like I said, there's so many different arrows that you can go from this. You look at all the way. You can make it a judicial story. You talk about the Supreme Court and how Trump appealed, the January, all this stuff. Clarence Thomas was the only one. And then you could branch off and start talking about Clarence Thomas and his ethics stuff. And then you can start talking about members of Congress. And then you can talk about the political extremism. And there's so many different avenues that January 6th can be the focal point on. So it's not going anywhere. But I just think it's important to not forget that day had real victims. People whose names you'll never know. And we can't lose sight of that. I'm not asking for a whole story about it or whatever, but just keep that in your mind, that even the stories that branch off of it, those stories exist because there were real victims that day.
Hi, I'm Naomi with the Washington Examiner. I think this is like a really important topic, not forgetting January 6th. I think the issue is also there's such a large segment of this population that either has minimized January 6th or doesn't think that it's a big deal. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who believes something like that, and have you been able to change their mind about it?
I don't talk to people like that. I plain and simple. We all watched it, and if you say something different, then I got nothing. I'm not gonna ram my head on that wall and expect that wall to move. It's stupid on me. That wall ain't going nowhere. So once somebody shows me who they are and whatever, all right, you clearly live in a different world than I do. It's not even worth it. And that's therapy and protect my peace and protect my boundaries. And I don't have those discussions with people. I'll talk to people, anybody that want to listen. If nobody, I'll talk to myself. But no, I'm not going to have that conversation with people. I won't.
Yeah, and I think for me, I steer away from politics, and I'm all about people. And my people are the police officers. And so that's where I like to keep my discussions. Yeah.
Hi there. Brian Mesker with Insider, and wanted to ask you about the Committee on House Administration recently granted reporters and some January 6th defendants, others, access to security camera footage from that day, and I recently had the opportunity to take a look at it. I wrote about it, but there are still calls for like some sort of mass release of the footage so that everyone in the public can see it. So I guess this is mostly for Officer Dunn, but Doctor, feel free to weigh in as well. I mean, what do you make of that? Because I know there are security concerns as well. Do you support something like that?
I don't know. Like, I'm a rank and file officer. I show up and I check people's IDs when they come in the building. And, I'm not in the command centers making those decisions, privy to those at all. So it's just, I would say, what do people want to see? Like, you have people that have been calling for the release of the tapes, that have watched Officer Fanone get dragged out of the crowd, but those same people say, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." I mean, what more do you want to see? Like, that's what people suck, man. And I just don't know how. It baffles me. Like, literally, I'm not searching for the words. I don't know. What more do they want to see? What are they looking for? A smoking gun? Like, oh, Pelosi was over there. She said she was there. Oh, we got her. She lied. Whatever. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I'm with the Texas Tribune. I wanted to follow up on something you said earlier about how you don't know how you would do your job if Trump were reelected president. But right now, there are a lot of people who are, shall we say, sympathetic towards the actions on January 6th. And a lot of people for J6, for example, show up to the Capitol every day. I mean, how do you do your job now with those people? Not only seeing them on a day-to-day basis, but also having your job be to protect them as well.
So I had to reform my whole narrative, my mindset once this happened. And I talk about in my book about what am I doing? It's bigger than me. It's democracy. Democracy, you can't be a hypocrite when it comes to democracy. And I'm protecting a seat, not a person. So this seat, remember, may represent 1 million people. So it's just one person there, but he's representing 1 million people. And I got to frame that in my mind that it's not just about one person who may think this way or that. That seat existed before I was alive, and it exists way after I'm gone. So we need to preserve it while we're here. So that's why it's important for me to do my job and try to keep, the political, personal matters out of it. That's why it's kind of like it's such a work on Capitol Hill. How can you keep politics out of it? It's hard, but I do the best that I can. And I've protected Republicans, Democrats, Independents on all sides of the aisle that I like and don't like. And I just got to keep that mindset that it's not about that individual. It's about the American people, because the American people who put that person in that seat.
Hey, Kirsten Garris with Cox Media Group. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. But for both of you, Doctor, for your organization, do you guys plan to address training, like at the police academy, to include more of what PTSD can do to you? And then for Harry, would you want to see training change within Capitol Police? Because you talked about this has been ingrained since day one. How do you change the stigma of mental health? What would you want to see as an officer? What would help new officers so they know to speak up, they know to go to a wellness center?
Thank you for the question. So my foundation will not specifically address that, but that is certainly on my radar, and it is very important. And for example, through my work with U.S. Capitol Police, that is one focus, to try to educate folks when they are just joining the force, and continue this education throughout their career as well as when they retire. And I also just want to highlight that there is a lot of great work that exists right now in terms of training, peer support. There are a lot of best practices that exist. And the goal of my foundation isn't necessarily to duplicate that, but to identify where there are gaps and try to focus on those issues. And so that's why I think there's tremendous importance to targeting law enforcement officers early in their career, and that should definitely occur. But again, my foundation will be focusing on these gaps, areas that are not being adequately addressed at the moment.
Okay, that's a really good question, because I think that's how you change the culture. You start it when it's brand new. So officers are going to continue to age out and phase out, and we could do as much as we can with those officers that currently subscribe to the old culture. Let's call it the old culture. We could address the gaps, like Serena said. But the new ones coming forward, everybody's getting this. It's like with the term, you grandfathered into this, but everybody else going forward, you have to have this. And I feel like that's a great way to change the overall culture. But you still have to acknowledge the ones that still exist within the current culture, and do our best to meet them where they are. But I think it's definitely important in new academy classes, new training, new officers, that everybody gets the spiel about mental health and wellness, and the resources and training, all that. I think that's a fantastic idea. I don't know, like I said, I'm Harry Dunn. I'm just Harry Dunn, the citizen now. I'm not the officer. But I do believe that I think our department's going forward with that. That's what I've seen, but I can't say officially that that's their,
You mentioned that both of you have been in the courtroom before, in probably several cases. I don't know. But from what you've seen so far, do you believe that there has been adequate justice in terms of prosecutions that have gone forward?
That's one of the most difficult, not your question, but one of the toughest questions I've been asked is, what does justice and accountability look like? Because that's, from day one, that's been my mission. Justice and accountability, January 6th. What does justice look like? I don't know. But one of the answers I came up with that made the most sense to me is whatever it takes to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So I kind of think it's a wait and see if that's justice. Thank God I'm not at the Justice Department. It's not my job to assign what justice is or what it. But I don't know. I think for me, it's a wait and see. I mean, you could say is 10 years enough? Okay, what about 11? What about 20? I don't know. I could give a cynical, uneducated answer and just say, let them spend the rest of their life in jail, but that's not feasible, it's not reasonable. But just, I guess, to hammer home the fact where it never happens again is what I guess what it looks like for me.
Over here.
If President Trump were here right now, what would you say to him?
It's not difficult. Somebody asked me that because I went to his arraignment here in D.C. And I wouldn't have any words for him. Nothing. Like, I have hate in my heart for him, and I wouldn't waste any. And that's unhealthy. I acknowledge that, but it's real, and I wouldn't have any kind of nothing to say. Nothing. I got nothing.
And that comes from his
Everything.
go to the Capitol.
Yeah, and everything they said afterwards, double down, triple down, quadruple down. What's after quadruple? Right? You know what I mean, though, right? So no, I don't have any. No.
You talked about officers being afraid to use some of the resources that are available to them. Do any officers, talk to you in private about that? And I guess, what do you say to them to try to convince them to use some of those resources?
That's a good one. For me personally, I could think of three specific officers that have come to me and just heard me be vulnerable, say I'm not okay, that I'm going to therapy, that have said that they needed to talk to somebody and that helped them. So that was very rewarding for me. Serena could talk to this a little bit, but I think that this stigma of we got to be the police officers were problem solvers. Like, we don't take care of ourselves as often as we should because we're so worried about taking care of everybody else. And that's all first responders, I guess, not just police officers. But one of the phrases I just use is it's okay to not be okay. And, you show me somebody that always got it all together all the time, and I'll show you a big fat liar. We all go through stuff, and we need help. Not just you're when you have a broken arm, you go to your doctor, term physical doctor. I don't know. Physical. I'm drawing a blank right now. Physician. There we go. But we got to treat our minds in the same way that we treat our bodies too. And that's kind of some of the conversations that I have with some officers that are willing to have those conversations. You don't want to just force it on people. I don't.
And I've had the fortune of having a great relationship with a lot of officers at USCP, and it all comes down to reducing barriers and increasing access to services. Whether or not that's, having, on-site physical spaces available if someone needs to talk, or being able to get off of their shift to talk to someone without, having everyone know about that, addressing confidentiality issues. So there are a lot of areas that can be targeted to make it easier for officers to, increase their help-seeking behavior. And I just want to use this just to draw your attention to, yes, there are cultural barriers in policing. Yes, there's a macho behavior. Hey, I'm the protector. I can't cry out for help. But also, there are opportunities out there for agencies, for departments to make it easier for officers to seek help. I've talked to some of the U.S. Capitol Police officers. The response that I've gotten from them is it's not that I don't want to get help. They tell me what they would like to see so that they can get help. And so those officers exist, but I just think it's important for agencies to figure out how to make this easier for officers.
Like, for example, one of the things that, our wellness center is in one of the buildings off of South Capitol Street. And somebody that may have to come from all the way on by North Capitol Street to travel, like, man, I don't have time to access. It's not easy for me to get over there. Or manpower is so short, I can't, without everybody knowing my business, because, hey, you got to cover a spot. So, yeah, there are definitely things that accessibility will make it a lot easier for people to get help. So.
Well, I hate to end this here, but in Officer Dunn's words, this did not suck. This was extremely generous on both of your parts, and we really appreciate you coming forward and talking with us and sharing with us in a really meaningful way. Thanks very much.
You got it.
Thank you.